Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to the Kelly's Astrology podcast. I'm actually just home from a really fun and fabulous trip, which involved teaching a retreat in Tuscany. So I'm settling back into my usual rhythms and routines. Before I went away, I had pre-recorded some of the podcast episodes so that you could still enjoy a regular weekly show. So I hope you have been enjoying the podcast. I realized too that it's almost time to do another Q&A episode. So if you have a question that you would like me to answer in a future podcast episode, please leave it in the comments section below. You can do this on Spotify, on YouTube. You can probably do it on Apple as well. But if you can leave me a comment or question that you might have in the comment section below, I'll be able to include that in a future podcast episode. So this is the podcast episode for the week starting November 16, and I'm going to take a look at a featured aspect that is happening this week, but is also going to repeat 2 more times between now and the end of December. And of course, this does have to do with Mercury, who is going into its next Mercury retrograde cycle, which will be in Sagittarius. And as a result of that kind of circular, well, it's sort of a circular pattern visually, but in the zodiac, we see it as like a forward, backward, forward piece. Mercury is going to interact with a couple of different planets 3 times over the next 6 weeks. In today's show, I'm going to focus on Mercury in Sagittarius opposite Jupiter in Gemini. This is an important kind of aspect because Mercury and Jupiter are in each other's signs, so they have a lot of influence on each other, in addition to actually forming this opposition aspect. So let's get the technical dates and details out of the way. The first Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect will form on Monday, November 18, and that aspect will be from 18 Sag to 18 Gemini. The second Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect will happen on December 4th. Mercury will be retrograde at that time, and that'll be from 16 Sagittarius to 16 Gemini. And then for the third and final Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect, we're looking at December 26th from 13 degrees Sagittarius to 13 degrees of Gemini. So to summarize the dates, we have Mercury opposite Jupiter. It's November 18, December 4th, and December 26th. Mercury will be retrograde when it opposes Jupiter on December 4th. However, the quality of energy of Mercury opposing Jupiter is going to be pretty, there's going to be some common threads from those dates, November 18, December 4, and December 26. And really, as we're getting into this, when you look at this from this big picture overview perspective, the energy and the themes, the questions and the qualities of this aspect pattern of Mercury opposite Jupiter, they're actually going to have a big impact on the next 6 weeks. They're really going to flavor the rest of the calendar year, essentially. And so my intention in today's show is just to give you a sense of the vibe of this aspect, to give you a taste of what it can look and feel like so that you can recognize it when it shows up and so that you can work with it and manage it when you need to. Before we get any further into this week's aspect, I want to make sure that you know there is still time to join my Plan Your 2025 course. I'm going to teach you the exact techniques that I use to plan and organize my year and my calendar. You're going to learn the techniques of profections and we'll be exploring the transits for 2025. So if you would like some advanced insight on the cycles and trends that will activate your chart next year, I'd love to see you in class. You can find out more or sign up over at kellysastrology.com. So coming back to the astrology of this week, we've got this pattern of aspects forming from Mercury to Jupiter. So these Mercury-Jupiter aspects are going to form across the Gemini-Sagittarius axis. And so just think about that pair of signs, Gemini and Sagittarius, as being really active and influential over the next 6 weeks. Part of what is going to further activate that pair of signs is the new moon, which will be in Sagittarius on December 1, and then the full moon, which will be in Gemini on December 15. So we're all going to get this really expanded, amplified, kind of intensive insight around the Gemini and Sagittarius houses in our personal chart. So if you know your chart, think about the house where you have Gemini, the house where you have Sagittarius, and these two areas of life might be especially busy over the next 6 weeks. You might be moving things around or making tweaks and changes, as well as maybe dealing with things being a little bit more messy or disorganized than usual. So this is an activating type of aspect. It stimulates and moves things, but it does have a little bit, chaos isn't quite the right word. It has a level of uncertainty. We try something, we're not sure if we're going to stick with it, but we're testing and we're experimenting. We're restless, and maybe we're starting to ask questions. So let's talk a little bit more about the qualities of Mercury opposite Jupiter. Now, this is an aspect that has lots of enthusiasm, and it is full of big ideas, of grand concepts, and those kind of like large scale possibilities. Mercury opposite Jupiter is think big, dream big, we're talking big. There's a lot of optimism. There can be this sense of, what's possible, where could we go, what could we do? Underneath it, there is a different tone, but that's part of where the Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect starts. It can be about dreams and about bright visions. It's very confident, so there's a very expressive quality. You want to say it out loud. You want to act on the idea that you have. And so this idea of being open to new experiences is very much a part of Mercury opposite Jupiter. It also has this kind of mentally adventurous energy, which means our mind can be more active, can be more open, but there's more of this puzzling, wondering, imagining going on as well. What Mercury opposite Jupiter is not great for is details, organizing, or paying attention to deadlines. So this is very big picture conceptual. It's not about the minutiae and the nitty gritty. It's not practical necessarily. It's kind of confident and inspired. So yes, you might have a wealth of ideas and you might find yourself exploring a wide variety of possibilities and options. It can seem as though anything is possible under an aspect like this. Since this aspect is tied into the Mercury retrograde, so an important piece there is that Mercury opposes Jupiter on Monday, November 18. So a lot of this like big possibility, grand dream energy, you're going to start feeling really soon if you're not already feeling it now. Because we know that Mercury is going to come back and speak to Jupiter again twice in December, you may not want to rush in on these big ideas, or you may not want to go all in with taking action on the things that you might be feeling really confident and enthusiastic about. Not just yet. And that's because this aspect is part of the Mercury retrograde. And so you'll perhaps want to notice and pay attention to the big ideas and big dreams that come in, but you're going to want to sit with them and mull them over and check them out and do a bit of research before, rushing in to make the choice. So we don't want to go too quickly with this aspect. Really, the thing is, we can feel so excited that something is like coming together in such a beautiful way. And then as this aspect kind of continues to unfold, we realize, oh, there's a few details that I missed, and now it's not as great as I thought, or it's going to be more complicated to make happen. So the idea here is that taking a bit of time to keep sitting with and keep dreaming about the big ideas is going to ultimately work in your favor in the long run. So it will be important to give yourself some space, at least mentally, free up some time in your schedule, give yourself less demands or less responsibilities so that you can wonder and you can imagine and you can kind of philosophize. You might question why. Why are things the way they are? Why am I doing what I'm doing? These big existential questions are going to be tied into this Mercury-Jupiter aspect. You might even experience a bit of a temporary loss of faith or purpose. You might be sort of wondering, well, can I keep doing this? Should I keep doing this? Do I want to keep doing this? So it's a great aspect for asking questions. So if you're finding that you feel like you've lost a bit of your faith or you're starting to wonder about things that you never thought you would want or you would dream about, I would say, these could be clues that maybe you're ready for a meaningful change. Maybe you're ready for a meaningful change in direction or focus or structure around your days, your life, your priorities. Maybe you want to check in with what actually feels fulfilling for you now at this stage of life. We do outgrow our reasons why, and this aspect might clue you in to a pattern or a responsibility or even something that you've loved doing for a long time that you're realizing is no longer lighting you up in the way that it used to. So this idea of asking those big why questions, it's good to check in and see if the big whys that used to drive you are still the big whys that are driving you now. So it does feel a bit existential. It feels very like I can't figure out the minutia until I've got like my mission statement or until I've clarified what feels like a sense of purpose or what my intention, what is the thing I'm trying to do or experience. And then, working back from that in terms of what a year or months or what weeks could look like. So lots of questions. This Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect, it's very enthusiastic. It really has a lot of confidence, but it also has this absent-minded or forgetful quality to it. You might find that you've missed something due to not reading the fine print or that you overlooked a whole piece of information that was kind of necessary. After all, both Mercury and Jupiter will be in signs of their detriment as they make these aspects. So this can add an uncertain and inconsistent quality. It's an important clue that things tied to Mercury and Jupiter over the next 6 weeks are going to be in flux, are going to be kind of uncertain, and are unlikely to be resolved quickly. So events and plans are likely to be more changeable than usual. It feels like there's a lot that could be up in the air and unknown, at least for now. So finding your way to be okay in an uncertain time or when things are kind of just not, we can't know yet. Sometimes you're like, I want to know the answer to this thing, but I have to wait for these other 3 things to happen first. So we're in process, but we're not at the place of getting answers or clarity just yet. Mercury and Jupiter are planets that are associated with learning and education, with the law, with legal matters, with justice, and as well with business, with money, with deals and discussions. Mercury and Jupiter are also about transport and logistics and, planes, trains, and automobiles, with shipping, for instance, delivery type stuff. So there's a lot of parts of everyday life that come under the purview of Mercury and Jupiter. And so all of these areas, all of these topics are experiencing a little bit of flux and uncertainty. They're having to process maybe more complicated things or higher volumes. Of course, this Mercury-Jupiter aspect is happening during the late November, early December period, which is really busy in retail. So with shipping and logistics and deliveries, this feels like it could be messier than usual. So personally, with Mercury and Jupiter so tied into each other right now, you might be exploring learning or study opportunities. You might be thinking about, what do I want to learn? What do I want to discover? What do I want to expand my knowledge around in the new year? And what's that going to look like? How is that going to fit in the schedule? So this is a great time to be looking at learning, study, whether it's writing, research, teaching, either you the student or the teacher, all of those Mercury-Jupiter things are up in the air. We're not sure yet. We're exploring, but we don't know just yet. Because of the money, deal making, kind of economic business side of Mercury-Jupiter, you might be reviewing a business or a financial arrangement that you're part of. You might be reassessing your spending, your budgets. You might be renegotiating things in that money contract space. And of course, there's also the legal side of things where legal matters may be a little up in the air as well. We've got matters about like truth or justice or fairness that are being questioned and explored and maybe pulled apart. And how do we want to define that collectively, socially, culturally? So there is a lot that is going on as part of this Mercury-Jupiter aspect. Ultimately, both Mercury and Jupiter are planets of the mind. They're planets of thinking, of intellect, of knowledge, and of wisdom. And so there is a big emphasis on what's going on in our brains, our mental state, our mindset. And so this idea of wanting to think more, to figure things out, is really amplified as Mercury in Sagittarius opposes Jupiter in Gemini. And so one of the things we're all going to need to keep in mind is that as much as there is a lot to think about and there's a lot to figure out, there's a lot to plan and try and organize, we're going to need to balance out all of that extra thinking with pastimes that allow the mind to rest. So things like reading or journaling, walking in nature, gentle movement that encourages a focus on breathing, perhaps yoga or Pilates or swimming, maybe even dance. These could be really calming and surprisingly clarifying right now. One of the tricks I see people fall into when there's this sort of excess of Mercury thinking energy about is the false idea that thinking harder or having more information will help us solve the problem or come to an answer or a choice. When in fact, because we do have Jupiter in the mix here, we have to stay in touch with our faith. We have to stay in touch with that higher wisdom, if you like, or divine knowledge. And we often get access to that when we're not in that heavy thinking, analyzing, overthinking space. And so activities that take you out of that kind of panic thinking space are going to be very helpful for you to find that sense of meaning and purpose. It sounds counterintuitive, but it really works. So give it a shot. So Mercury opposite Jupiter is a really lovely pattern for reflecting on what has been and for questioning what might be. Giving yourself space to be in a place of not knowing and learning how to stay calm, like to regulate your nervous system, even when you're not sure, that's going to be a great skill that you can practice and learn over the next few weeks. And if you find that your head really hurts because of the intense thinking or the extra thinking that you're doing while you're trying to figure out a plan or a choice, do take a break. Mercury and Jupiter are not going to complete their pattern of aspects until late December. And that's really the time frame that I would encourage you to look towards for figuring things out, whether it's a studied learning thing, whether it's a work-life meaning purpose thing, whether it's something to do with money and spending, or whether it's something to do with specifically in your chart, the topics of your Gemini and your Sagittarius house. You're just beginning a 6-week process of research, of questioning, at looking at options. And it's really not until the second half of December that you're going to be in a place where you're like, I think I have learned enough, gathered enough info, and felt into my big whys enough that I think I could make a choice. So that December 26th, that final Mercury-Jupiter aspect, think about that as a little bit of a deadline or a choice-making time. So that allows you to really use that Mercury opposite Jupiter aspect and the full timeline of it, starting November 18 and going until December 26. So you might need until late December to really settle on a vision, a dream, or a plan for yourself for the future. Mercury and Jupiter, as well as the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius, represent opposing priorities and interests. Things like facts versus faith, or reason versus belief. And part of your inner dialogue right now might involve this negotiation between what you know versus what you believe, between what's for sure and what might be. And so you're really going to find yourself going back and forward between these opposing qualities of energy. Throughout the show today, I have mentioned the houses of Gemini and Sagittarius in your chart. This is one of the best ways to personalize the astrological weather to your chart and therefore your life. So the topics of your Gemini and Sagittarius houses, they can be two areas of your life where you feel maybe especially uncertain or restless right now. It might be where you're dealing with delays or you've got some of those snafus coming up because of forgetfulness or absent-mindedness. It might be that you're just really restless about these parts of your life, that they're not satisfying you the way they used to. And so you're kind of pushing things around and tweaking things and trying to shift things into a more interesting, exciting, or meaningful pattern. If that's the case, I'd really encourage you to question your options. What are the possibilities? How big do you want to go? What are small scale ways of making these changes? The idea of thinking and talking and doing a bit of research about what you might do can be a great way of letting your imagination kind of run free, let your mind wander, so that rather than turning everything upside down and then maybe having to change it in new ways in the future, you're allowing yourself to get into the energy of the aspect in a way that is maybe a little bit more reasonable for you. And most importantly, I really just wanted to make sure that you were all getting a little bit of insight into the questioning, the restlessness, the uncertainty of this aspect and how that might flavor the next 6 weeks. To also get a sense of the fact that it is a time for asking big questions, for exploring your reasons why. What is my motivation? Why am I doing this again? Why did I start this? Is that still important to me? And if so, keep going. And if it's not still important to you, what else would be a better fit for you right now? So giving yourself permission and space to wonder, to dream, and to imagine. Really giving yourself time to check out the other options that are available to you. You might find after all of this checking out and testing and questioning that you're actually still really content with where you are and what you're doing. And what will feel different inside you is that you will feel more affirmed and confident and sure of yourself. So these periodic sort of questioning aspects, they really help us clarify the why and whether we want to keep going as we are, or we might realize, no, I'm done with this. I'm not learning and growing here anymore. I'm going to need to make some changes. And then what you're left with is this clarity around, this is where in my life I need to make some changes. And then you can be more focused and intentional with your choices going forward. I would love to hear what houses this Mercury in Sag opposite Jupiter and Gemini aspect is activating for you. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. Take good care this week, and I look forward to sharing more next week. Bye for now.